The students of Mrs. B's 6th grade class marched in a single file line as instructed. Young children though they were, semblances of adult thoughts passed intermittently through their minds. Not last among these thoughts was the ridiculous notion they were being herded like sheep to the library, where they were supposed to meet with a storyteller. Mrs. B motioned for the students to sit, and mentioned they were extremely fortunate, as the storyteller was none other than the famous Mr. E. No sooner than she spoke the words, a strange-looking fellow, having a nose much too long, a mouth much too small, and ears much too big, strode into the room, his steps conveying a grace unexpected of a man of such features. The children began to chuckle, and Mr. E seemed to be blissfully unaware.
"Good morning, children,"
began Mr. E.
"I understand that all of you are in the 6th grade, but my, you look so small. Now tell me, what are some of your favorite stories?"
Some children mentioned fairy tales their parents had told them when they were younger, or stories and movies they liked. However, one little girl, with a name tag declaring her name to be Hope, sat with her arms crossed and a pout on her face.
"What about you, my dear? What is your favorite story?"
Mr. E inquired. Hope replied,
"Not to be rude, Mr. E, but I'm almost 12 years old. I think I'm a little too old to be listening to stories."
"Oh, but my dear children, no one is ever too old for a story. In fact, stories are even more important as you get older, so you never lose your great imagination."
Thus speaking, Mr. E began his story. In a time and place long forgotten, between the dominions of reality and fantasy, there lay a town by the name of Manas. The town was blessed with the most fertile soil in all the world, into which any type of seed or root could be placed, and growth was ensured. There was a stream which flowed into the middle of the town, carrying the most pure water imaginable, with which the crops could be watered. The buildings of the town were pristine and unmarked, each having a board in front, detailing the purpose it served. The people of the town were few in number, maybe 100 or so, each person serving a specific role and contributing to the sustainment of the community in any way possible. However, the cozy little village was forever in the shadow of the enormous stone wall which encircled it, a shade of grey which seemed to say, "I'm not here for beauty, simply for defense." The wall let none in and none out. No one knew the origin of the wall, although some of the older folk in the village quite often told tales of the erection of the wall right after the area was first settled. The citizens of Manas were self-sufficient, hardy folk, who had long since stopped questioning the presence of the wall. They lived out peaceful lives, mostly spent harvesting the single crop produced in Manas, rice. Indeed, rice was the basis of the community. It was the primary food source, used to barter for other goods, and what few decorations villagers made for their simple houses were adorned with rice. Within this community, there lived a particular elderly couple. The husband was a shepherd, and the wife was considered one of the most wise women in the village. They lived on the northern edge of the village, with the imposing wall only a few miles away. It was usual for the old couple to travel into the heart of town once a week to get some rice by trading wool from their sheep. As they reached their twilight years, these treks had become more difficult and infrequent. This also meant they had to ration a little more, the rice which they did have, as they had no other food source. They seldom received visitors from the town, as not many wished to venture so close to the wall. Strange occurrences were said to take place from approaching too close. It so happened that one day, when the old man was out with his herd, a strong storm began brewing. He immediately returned home, and began escorting the sheep into their reserve. The old man felt apprehensive, as he felt something eerie in the air. Suddenly a sharp crack was heard as the tree next to him was split by lightning, deafening him for a moment. Scared by the thunder and lightning, one of his sheep began to run away. An obscure thought passed quickly through the old man's mind. How funny it was that seemingly only fear could produce such an emphatic response from the docile creatures. These thoughts were quickly replaced by the pressing need to find the sheep, and so locking the remaining sheep away, he started off. Faster and faster the sheep ran, bounding over broken branches and leaping over pools of water. The old man simply could not keep up. Huffing and puffing, he had to stop. He leant his arm to the ground, which in turn supported him, and he sat down to regain his energy. It was at this moment he realized just how far he had come. He had been so focused on the sheep, he had not realized how close he was to the absolute edge of the village. Indeed, he could see the monumental stone wall, no more than a few paces in front of him. He was at once fearful and anxious. Even he, who lived closer to the segment of the wall than anyone in the whole village, had never dared come this close. Those who had come once near the wall either refused to go as near a second time, or had become obsessed with the thought of scaling the monumental structure. In both cases, those involved claimed they had heard a number of voices which beckoned and pleaded with them to attempt to cross. Somehow those people never seemed to be content with life in the village as they once were, forever changed by the grey monolithic siren. With the storm reaching a chaotic state, the old man thought it wise to find shelter for the night, rather than attempt the trek back home. The old man mustered up the reserves of his strength, and began hobbling along, looking to build a makeshift shelter. He soon found a tree which was suitable for his purpose, and began the task of collecting sticks and stones. Suddenly, he thought he heard the distant sound of a human voice. Pitying the poor fellow, who was undoubtedly caught in the tempest as well, the old man set out at once to find him. Following the sound of the man's voice, when the absence of thunder permitted, the old man came across a figure lying nearly face down in the mud, clearly coping with a great deal of pain. Upon turning him over, the old man was taken aback. The stranger was unlike anyone else the old man had ever seen before. He had fair, delicate features, a sharp contrast to that of the inhabitants of Manus. His clothing was of a material the old man had never seen in his great many years, and even the sound of the stranger's voice as he groaned distinguished his presence as an outsider. From the way the stranger held his own leg, the old man could sense it was in a great deal of pain. Feeling the stranger's leg, the old man was sure of the presence of a break. At this, the old man staggered back. It was evident to him from the way the man's leg was broken that only a sharp fall would have caused it. Seeing as there were no trees in the near vicinity, that left only one logical conclusion. The man had come from the other side of the wall. A loud groan from the injured man quickly snapped the old man back to reality. The old man placed his hand on the stranger's forehead, and was alarmed at how warm it was, indicating a great fever. Nevertheless, the old man knew it would have to be dealt with in the morning, after the storm subsided. The stranger, while the old man held his head, fell into a state of unconsciousness. Scarcely believing the thought of other people living outside of the village, the old man quickly took the stranger by the arms, and began to drag him to the shelter he had fashioned. As he was being dragged, the stranger lifted his weak arm just slightly, pointing his finger toward a pile of dirty leaves. Noticing this motion, and gently laying the stranger down, the old man walked toward the pile of leaves. Spotting a solid-looking stick of decent length on the ground, the old man picked it up and approached the pile very cautiously. Extending forth with the stick, he quickly poked the center of the pile and hit something solid, and heard the most terrifying noise he had ever heard in his life. Mustering up some courage, he used the stick to separate the leaves in the pile, and saw it was simply an odd-looking sack. Scooping it up, he returned to where the stranger was laying, and dragged him back to the campsite. The next morning, the old man fashioned a rudimentary stretcher out of some cloth he had obtained by tearing his shirt and 2 large sticks he found. With great effort, he transferred the still semi-unconscious stranger onto the stretcher, and holding the ends of the sticks, forming one side of the makeshift stretcher, began the arduous journey of dragging the stranger back to town. The appearance of the stranger had caused quite a rise in the number of visitors the old couple had. No one knew of the origins of the traveler, as he had come to be known by the townsfolk, for his strange travel-worn attire and sack. A great many questions were posed to the old man, who had found the traveler, and brought him back to his home, where he, assisted by his wife, had been nursing him back to health. The old man hoped when the traveler regained his strength, he would be able to provide all the answers. As the days went by, the fever seemed to break, but no change was observed in the consciousness of the stranger, with the exception of a few unintelligible words muttered from his sleep. The old couple was deeply worried about the survival of their new housemate. Every morning they would wake and hand-feed him boiled rice. Although this seemed to improve his health slightly, no significant change was seen. They called the most experienced healers from the village, that were well versed in all manners of herbs present in the village, but still no improvement was seen. As the old man would go out with the sheep during the day, the old woman would stay at the house, keeping a constant watch on the stranger. As the woman was busy in the kitchen, preparing fresh boiled rice for the day, she heard aloud. She hurried back to the room where the stranger was laying to find him with an outstretched arm, having knocked over a cup. Following the direction of his arm, the old woman saw he was pointing at the sack which the old man had found with the stranger. Struggling to keep his arm outstretched, the stranger once again fell into unconsciousness, and his arm fell as if lifeless. The old woman quickly strode to the sack. This was the strangest sack the woman had ever seen. It contained several separate containment areas, divided by metallic teeth. Reaching for the outermost section, as the stranger had been pointing to, and approaching with her hand carefully so as not to get bitten by the teeth, she found a small, shiny piece, which she dragged to open the area. Slowly reaching inside, she pulled out a small box, which had a large red symbol in the shape of two perpendicular rectangles. Opening the box, she found a piece of paper, and a bottle which rattled when shaken. Unfolding the paper, 2 lines were written in characters she had never seen before. Below, another line was written in even stranger characters. As she read on, she realized the line in each section must contain the same meaning. And suddenly she stopped. She had reached a line written in plain English. Place 2 pills from bottle into mouth and follow with water. Opening the bottle and producing 2 round objects from inside, she quickly placed these into the traveler's mouth and followed with a glass of water. With a start, the traveler arose, examining his surroundings and speaking in a language foreign to the ears of the old woman. Just then the old man walked in. As he stepped into his home, the traveler stood up and outstretched his hand as if expecting something. As he stood up, the old man and old woman took a step backwards. Unsure of what to do, the old man also outstretched his hand. The stranger quickly clasped his hand around the old man's, and proceeded to move them up and down in a fashion most odd to the old man. Possessing a look, excited but fearful at the same time, the old woman started toward the stranger. The stranger spoke, "Ningla Arana." The old man glanced at his wife, who reciprocated his confusion. "Angane Nangro Tieta," the traveler expressed, with a perplexed look. "We don't understand you," the old man mustered up the courage to say. "Ah, English," responded the traveler. "I'm sorry, I was in a most delirious state when any communication took place. I had heard reports, but I couldn't be sure. Such an arcane language it is." "What else would we speak?" asked the old man. Yes, surely nothing else," chuckled the traveler. "Oh, but I've forgotten my manners. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Surya, but I believe your community has another name for me, yes?" He produced a sheepish grin. The old couple was quite confused. The stranger seemed so different than anyone they had ever known. Thinking about it now, the old man realized even the way the traveler spoke